You know how everyone says a goldfish has a 3-second memory? Completely false. Or even those outlet stores selling what they claim to be original products at half the price. Well, I hate to tell you, but it's probably fake. And the random facts don't stop there. I've got 20 of them, so here we go. When someone tells you a horror movie was blood curling, it's more than a metaphor. It's a physiological fact. A 2015 study found that watching scary films like The Ring can raise levels of factor VIII, a key blood clotting protein, by up to 57%. In other words, intense fear can quite literally make your blood curdle. In the 1950s, the US developed a real plan to nuke the moon. It was called Project A119, and they wanted to create a massive explosion, not for science, just to show their military and technological superiority to the world. Their plan was to detonate a nuclear warhead on the moon's surface and create a big flash that could be seen from Earth. And the project got surprisingly far before they finally decided maybe showering the moon in radioactive dust and sparking global outrage wasn't the best idea. Forget everything you know about goldfish, because they won't. That's right. The common misconception that goldfish only have a 3-second memory is a complete myth. Studies have shown that goldfish can retain information for months. They can recognize human faces, learn daily routines, and even be trained to perform simple tasks like swimming through hoops or pushing levers for food. So the next time they stare at you from the tank, just know they remember everything. Before the invention of the telephone, it was rare to greet someone by saying hello. People preferred time-based greetings like good morning or good afternoon. This is because nearly all interactions were face-to-face, so you always knew the time of day. But when people started using telephones, speaking to people remotely across towns and time zones, this presented a bit of a problem because you didn't know what time it was on the other end. And the debate around which greeting to use was heated. There was strong competition from ahoy, but they came to their senses and chose hello. In the 1800s, it was standard practice for dentures to be made using real human teeth. Tooth hunters or tooth collectors would scavenge battlefield corpses after war. They'd pry out the healthy teeth from fallen soldiers and take them to sell at public teeth auctions. And the demand was there. Dentists bought bulk bags of mismatched teeth, turned them into dentures, and the wealthy would strut around happily with someone else's teeth in their mouth. Outlet stores have been lying to us. You may think you've scored a bargain snapping that Gucci bag for 50% off. I mean, who wouldn't? But what many don't know is that these stores usually aren't selling leftover retail stock. The items are made specifically for the outlet. They often use cheaper materials, have completely different product codes, and are essentially imitation versions of the real thing, straight from the brand itself. It may look cute and harmless, but you might be surprised. The hooded patchouli is actually one of the few poisonous birds on Earth. And it's not just one of those mildly irritating poisons like poison ivy or something that just makes you itchy. Their skin and feathers are laced with the same deadly neurotoxin found in poison dart frogs. A toxin so potent it rivals that of the inland taipan, the world's most venomous snake. But interestingly, the bird doesn't make the toxin itself. It gets it from eating beetles loaded with this stuff. It's a literal case of food poisoning. Everyone thinks the Secret Service was made to protect presidents. This isn't quite right. When the agency was established in 1865, it was all about fighting the massive wave of counterfeiting at the time. The problem got so bad that as much as 1 in every 3 US dollars in circulation was fake. You'd buy a loaf of bread, get some change, and be wondering if they gave you monopoly money in return. It wasn't until 1901, after President McKinley was assassinated, that they realized relying on local police and volunteers for protection probably wouldn't cut it. So they added presidential security to the resume and evolved into the Secret Service we know today. These days, we normally buy sugar in neat little granules, but this wasn't the case a few hundred years ago. In the 1700s, sugar was sold in rock-hard cone-shaped loaves. And if you wanted some, you had to hack chunks off with iron tools called sugar nips. Not too dissimilar to your everyday garage pliers. It wasn't until 100 years later, when granulated sugar became a thing, that people could finally enjoy their tea without risking the loss of a finger. In Bangkok, a restaurant called Watana Panich has been serving the same beef noodle soup from a continuously simmering pot for over 45 years. Known as the perpetual stew, the broth is never emptied. It's just topped up with fresh ingredients and kept simmering all day long. And although consuming a 45-year-old stew would seem like a pretty obvious way to end up in the emergency room, the constant high heat makes sure the stew just gets more flavorful and the nasty bacteria stays out. When Parcel Post launched in 1913, the US Postal Service allowed packages under 50 pounds, but they failed to clarify that you couldn't mail people. That loophole led to several families sending their own children through the mail. They'd pin stamps to their coats or jackets and have postal workers escort them to their destination. But it's no surprise that this all stopped a couple of years later, when the Postal Service specified that humans didn't qualify as parcels. The early 17th century was a wild time, especially if you were a gardener. In the Netherlands, it was the height of Tulip Mania, when tulips were the hottest commodity in Europe. Demand exploded and prices skyrocketed, so much so that just one rare bulb could buy you a house. The most coveted were the broken tulips, named for the way their petals fractured into dramatic streaks and flames. But in early 1637, the tulip bubble burst. Bulbs that had been worth a fortune were suddenly worthless. And the whole notion of trading a house for a flower became a textbook example of speculative collapse. Globus sensation, also known as globus pharyngis, is the term used to describe the feeling of a lump or pill stuck in your throat when there's actually nothing there. And the condition is more common than you'd think, especially among people who rely on their voice a lot, like teachers and singers. It's often triggered by stress or anxiety, and the sensation can stick around for months or even years. And while it's not harmful, constantly feeling like there's something stuck in your throat sure can mess with your head. Imagine turning on the TV and watching a 7-hour train ride with no cuts and no commentary. Well, in Norway, you can, and it's called SlowTV. It's a national phenomenon. Thousands tune in to watch everyday moments unfold in real time. There's the painfully uneventful broadcasts of salmon swimming upstream, unedited 5-day coastal ferry voyages, and even the 12-hour live National Knitting Night event that covered everything from sheep shearing to spinning wool. Formed in 1957 and modelled after World War II commandos, the Danish Frogmen are a special ops unit to be feared. They're the masters of Arctic warfare. There's fewer than 100 of them, and they're trained to operate in near-freezing waters, infiltrate enemy coastlines, and neutralise targets before anyone even knows they were there. While some may think of pirates as lawless brutes, they were often anything but. In the 17th and 18th century, they followed a set of rules called the Articles of Agreement. Each member of the crew had to sign, and it covered everything from how loot was split to no fighting on deck, and even the payout if you lost a limb. And trust me, you didn't want to break the rules, or you could find yourself tied to the mast and whipped, or worse, they'd leave you on a deserted island and sail off into the sunset. Have you ever stared at a keyboard and thought the layout made no sense? You're not alone, but the random smattering of letters is all by design. Christopher Scholes, a 19th century newspaper editor, invented the QWERTY Layout to stop typewriters from jamming. The machines back then couldn't handle the rapid keystrokes of letters placed too close together. So Scholes came up with the logical solution. He just spread the common letter pairings out. And while it may just look like the chaotic work of a madman, the QWERTY keyboard layout is more intuitive than first thought. There's a church in the Czech Republic decorated entirely from human bones. It's called the Sedlec Chapel and contains the remains of over 40,000 people. These are people who died during the Black Death, the devastating plague that swept through Europe in the 14th century and saw bodies pile up faster than graves could be dug. And to paint the picture, when you enter, you'll find skulls stacked into towering pyramids, femurs decorating the walls, and the massive chandelier crafted from approximately 600 individual bones, at least one of every type of bone in the body. Fox tossing was once a favourite pastime of European nobles. It involved flinging live animals, foxes, hares, and even wild boars, into the air using a massive sling they'd stretched out across the ground. Two people stood either side and pulled the sling tight as the animal ran across it, launching it skyward. Players were judged on the height of the toss, sometimes 20 feet or more, their coordination, and even the elegance of their movements. It was almost always fatal for the animals involved and considered one of history's more disturbing and brutal forms of entertainment. Whittier, Alaska isn't your average town. Around 85% of its 200 residents live in a single 14-story Cold War era building called the City Under One Roof. The US Army built it in the 1950s and it's got everything. There's apartments, a school, a grocery store, and even City Hall. And to add to the intrigue, the only road in is a 2.5-mile tunnel that cuts straight through a mountain. A pretty inconvenient way to get home. And there's my 20 random facts. Let's hope that I didn't just waste my time creating a video on par with Norway's SlowTV. It's not easy competing with unedited, commentary-free footage of salmon swimming upstream. But if the facts kept you entertained, take a look at my other videos. I promise you, they're a whole new level of randomness. But anyway, I appreciate the support. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next time.